policy advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. Kimberly is also TV correspondent CW6 News San Diego, as well as One American News Network. Her website, thekdreport.com, and she should be streaming live right now at Facebook. I'll check and see. Kimberly, are you there?
I am there. How are you doing, Chuck?
I am here too. Yes. Did you go to the Super Bowl game, Kimberly?
No. I sadly missed the halftime as well, so.
The greatest performance ever? No? Not.
Well, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's get into some serious stuff here.
Yeah.
Jumping on the Hezbollah narco-terrorism bandwagon.
Yeah.
Boy, this is some interesting information here.
Yeah, I thought we'd kind of change it up a little bit here and talk about I think that most Americans that knew when President Trump came into office, he was going to build the wall. He was worried about the security along that southern border. And I thought that it would be kind of an interesting little topic to kind of go back and revisit Hezbollah. And we're learning with a lot of these terrorist organizations that they are now finding that while, of course, if you're a Muslim, then you are not going to be participating in using drugs or alcohol. But wait a minute, you can make a lot of money to fund your cause by selling and manufacturing drugs, which Hezbollah has joined the team. I think that this testimony, coupled with our friend China, who is manufacturing the fentanyl and sending it directly to the drug cartels in Mexico, presents a terrorist-like movement, and our borders are not secure enough to actually prevent that, drug, pipeline from going over the border or under the border.
Well, and you're talking about where Italy, all right,
yeah,
where they seized 84 million counterfeit pills,
mm-hmm.
And these apparently the pills were seized in the southern Italian port of Salerno,
mm-hmm.
Worth 1 billion euros.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like a lot to me.
Yeah,
1
it is.
billion, yes.
It's a lot, but this is where, like, the EU, most westernized countries are finding, especially now with the pandemic, that you're having an increase in drug use, personal drug use. So, if you're a drug trafficker, a drug smuggler, or a drug manufacturer, you're going to jump on this industry because you're going to make a lot of money at it. And currently, where Hezbollah seems to be manufacturing the drugs is on the Syrian border, because we know that the peace-loving people with the Arab Spring took hold in Syria, and it's just a great prosperous country. And of course, I'm being sarcastic because there's nothing left of the country. So now we've taken a country that was actually part of the world civilization and reduced it to nothing more than a terrorist country that now manufactures methamphetamine. So, and we've seen this in Afghanistan, where the Taliban, before we went in, they were really strong. They eradicated the poppies in Afghanistan. Along comes the U.S., launches our counterterrorism into Afghanistan because they said they're training terrorists and we have to blow them all up. So what happens is now you see the Taliban, now they're shepherding over these poppy fields, and they're actually manufacturing and growing more poppies than ever. Again, this is a byproduct of war. And the United States has been at war in the Middle East for roughly 20 years, maybe some say more, if we're looking at proxy wars, including in that. But what we have to see is that what happens with the drug use, and when it gets down to people, and how it destroys populations and families and communities, and these narco-traffickers that they're calling them across the globe are doing it for a reason. They can make money at it, and while they're at it, they can bring down the Western world.
Yeah, it's not like they're shipping in counterfeit tennis shoes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, this is very serious stuff. And also, I've seen some reports just recently where there's a liquid that's required in all this, most of the methamphetamines that are
Yeah.
coming across the border that's killing so many people.
Yeah.
And the liquid is actually made in China.
Yep.
All right, and then it's snuck in either into Canada or it's snuck into mainly Mexico, so it can get into here. And you know, everything you're saying, Kimberly, you know, like there's more poppies and all this stuff. You know, it's and the things that are being going on out there. It's like the average person doesn't hear about it. Is it because the mainstream media was had to have too much bad news about Trump?
Well,
was it also you weren't hearing about it on Fox? I mean,
well,
you know what I'm saying?
I think where you're going to hear a lot of this from, especially with the drug manufacturing and trafficking, is, you know, a lot of the anti-war groups out there. I mean, myself included, have been warning that, look, you know, there are consequences for being at war with countries, and in some cases, you know, the U.S. is like at war, and we're not actually at war because Congress does not want to do their job, and they keep relying on the failed Patriot Act. But when you look at these things, and I think that this, you know, this through the prism of like defense contractors and through the prism of governments and the defense Department of Defense, I mean, they are in the business of war. And if there's no war, then they're out of business. And when you look at the DEA, you're looking at the DEA now after the Patriot Act was passed in a revision in 2006. The DEA actually bumped up, you know, what they were working on, and now they became, counter-terrorism, narco people. They've been going over, and they're taking credit for bringing down Al Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban and FARC down in Colombia. So you're looking at all of this stuff, and again, I mean, at the end of the day, it's to feed the government, it's to feed war, and it's to crush the dreams of the middle class and the communities that are taking such a huge hit in this country due to the pandemic and the job loss and the likelihood of a lot of those jobs not coming back because we now have a Biden administration who wants to shut down energy. So you're going to see this grow, and we have a willing, population here that is willing to jump into the drugs because they just don't know what to do. They're aimless, and the government's not really looking after their needs because they're feeding the government, they're feeding the Defense Department, they're feeding the defense contractors, and they're feeding war. So this is what the media talks about. They do not talk about this because this is what the consequences of all that other stuff is.
Yeah, I got to apologize to Fox News because it wasn't drugs, but in your report you're talking about Roger Noriega, former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Western Hemispheric Affairs, and Noriega in 2011 sounded the alarm at Fox News that Venezuela state airline ferrying terrorists and weapons to our own neighborhood. Yeah. When it says own neighborhood, I'm trying to figure out which part of the neighborhood. Was it South L.A.? Was it East New York?
Yeah, well, again, this goes back to, I think, why President Trump, it was so important for him to try to get this border wall through. And he just reached barrier literally after barrier after barrier. And, it's a little disheartening that he didn't get to finish that project because, maybe then we would know, at least have a lot more control as to what's going, across the border and under the border because of the tunnels. They're coming under the border as well, getting the product in here. But over the weekend, there was a video that was making the rounds. At least I saw it. It came through my email box several times. And it's about the giant fence that's built around the entire Capitol area. So it's a big, tall fence, and it's got razor wire and all this stuff. And
the United States Capitol.
The United States Capitol. Yes. So I mean, it's a giant wall, and it's a really funny but sadly true situation where the Congress is completely putting a wall around themselves, where Nancy Pelosi was saying walls are racist, walls don't work, walls are terrible, they're un-American, go through all of that stuff. And it was, and the person that did the video is pretty clever in putting all of her little press conferences where she was talking negatively about the wall. It was, I think it was it was Turning Point USA. So anyway, so I give them credit.
I always bring up the point, that the Pope also mentioned about he didn't like the wall, when Trump got elected. The Vatican's got one of the best walls.
Pretty
in the
big
world.
one. Yep.
And the Democrats always said these walls on the border, they're keeping the children out.
Yeah.
It's for the children. I tell you, kind of like the Capitol wall that we now have, right?
Yeah.
To keep the children out.
Yeah, I
think if you're a member of, the Antifa, you're probably at least 18 or 19.
Well, yeah, and Antifa and Black Lives Matter, they were over in DuPont Circle doing their marches this weekend saying, burn it down, burn it down. I don't know that they realized their guy got into the office, so are they still wanting to burn things down? I don't, I don't understand the movement, I guess. I mean, I think that they, at their core, they may have some, values that they adhere to, but I mean, it just seems like every other day it's like, okay, wait a minute, I thought they were for this, and they're not, and then they move off to that.
Yeah. They say, Kimberly, we were on a roll. Don't stop us now. My goodness.
Or they want the publicity. So, yes, that's probably it.
Hey, I want you to touch on, because you brought up a lot about Israel here, and I think it was April 1996.
Yeah.
The sheltering refugees in the United Nations.
Yeah.
You want to use a little bit on that? I know that after the break we're going to get into, supposedly there's some important trial that's going to hang some terrorist that was responsible for the bombing of the Capitol. We'll mention that guy, whoever he is. Yeah.
Okay, we'll get to that. Yeah, I just wanted to also mention that when you're looking at the drug use and the where Hezbollah kind of came from and their growth within the realms of the terrorism world. In 1982, they were in the middle of a civil war in Lebanon, and the Israelis invaded the country. Their military invaded the country and killed roughly 20,000 people of Lebanon. Lebanon's a small, tiny country, very small population base. Used to actually be the French Riviera of the Middle East. No longer the case, but that kind of sparked Hezbollah's rise to power. And because they, look at Israel and they look at America, the big devil, the little devil types, and they throw us into that. And also, I wanted to kind of point that out that, maybe had that event not have happened, then the Lebanese, fighters would not have made their way to Mexico, because they actually do help the cartels build those borders underground. And when you look at the design of them and you compare them to what's in the Middle East, it's been proven that they are really good tunnel builders, and they've been helping our enemies. And they want the drugs and they want the weapons and whatnot to come into this country, because they would love to see America take itself down without being a big war, which we're on our way to doing, by the way. Going through and seeing how divisive this country has become, and there's been zero unity after the new president was put into the Oval Office. Only more and more division and kicking people when they're down, instead of saying, here's a hand, let's get up and talk, and let's get back to your corner, and we'll all move on from here. That doesn't happen. I think that Israel plays a huge role here, and I think that Israel has a lot to answer for when it comes to these kind of issues, because they seem to act first and think about the consequences later, and I think this is a direct result of that.
Another thing you mentioned in your latest report is this Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Ginger Thompson. In 2015, the New Yorker, Trafficking in Terror, and she was talking about where former senior money laundering investigator at the U.S. Department tells her that following the 9/11 attacks and the funneling of resources went into terrorism rather than the drug enforcement.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that didn't mean they all the money went into terrorism. Some of it probably still stuck in drug enforcement, right? Yeah. But
and when most people think of terrorism, I mean, 9/11, very tragic, happened, no doubt about it. We had terrorist attack on our country on 9/11. And you look at the terrorism, and if most people think about terrorists and where they live, they really associate that with the Middle East. They don't associate that with Canada or Mexico and things like that. However, if you take all the money away from the drugs, our enemies are looking at things like that and saying, okay, we're going after the weaknesses. What's the number one weakness the Americans seem to have? We don't want to build a fortified border wall, A, and B, a lot of Americans are addicted to drugs. So what better way to dumb down and wash out an entire generation of young people than to give them more drugs than they can dream of? And with the advent of fentanyl being thrown into the drug market, the overdoses have been tremendous. And we still seem to be pouring trillions of dollars into the Middle East, and we're not looking after our own society, our own people in this country. And that should be addressed. I think if you ask most Americans, do you think we should putting this money over in the Middle East? Because if we have really good borders, then we don't need to worry about them sneaking across the border, because we'll have a good border. And unless they're super good swimmers, they're not getting across the Atlantic. So I think that it's just time, and I'm it's not heartening to say what the Biden-Harris administration is going to do. They're going to let this turn into more of a free-for-all. But the longer we don't take care of this issue, then we're done.
It's a wonder Biden and Harris are not saying, what wall? What wall? We just built a brand new wall, didn't we? Yes.
Wall.
Hey, Kimberly Dvorak's going to be right back, and when we return, lawyers for former President Trump today submitted a brief saying that the effort to convict the president in the impeachment trial is a political theater. It's outside the Senate's constitutional authority, and just forget it. You don't need to insult him anymore. I made up the last part, of course.
Okay.
Well, Kimberly, he probably said more than that under his breath,
Yeah, most likely. So tomorrow we're going to, see the second impeachment trial of the President of the United States. Congress still has yet to see the rules of this so-called impeachment of the President, who actually is living in Florida, not in the White House any longer. And presumably we're going to see that he's going to be tried over incitement for insurrection of the United States. And they will have to take away the president's complete and total First Amendment rights, which is free speech. And this is, something that we have seen the left over and over go on TV. You're going to pay 6 ways to Sunday. The intel community will come and get you. Those kind of statements that we've heard are Maxine Waters. If you see a Trump person in a restaurant, in the mall, chase them down, chase them out. They have no place. You go get them and you tell them they are not wanted. Those kind of statements are okay on the left. And while I was looking at this and looking at the impeachment, and I just think it's pretty much going to be a sham going through.
But I got to tell you, I see this picture in my mind of Nancy Pelosi sitting at the impeachment trial and slowly tearing up the Constitution of the United States of America. Wouldn't that be a good political joke?
There you go. She would do that. If you do that meme, you may find yourself arrested by the federal government these days. So let's be careful about that. Anyways.
There's a different guy in office.
Yeah.
You can do it with the State of the Union address, but not the Constitution.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, just want to make this last point that while I was looking at all this stuff, it was brought to my attention that back in 1983, that there was a bombing, actual bombing at the U.S. Capitol. And the bombing was perpetrated by a group called M19. They were a left-wing communism organization. And this person that was arrested, Susan Rosenberg, her sentence was commuted by Bill Clinton. And I'd like to leave this with the listener and go do the research. I triple-checked all of this. She's now a leading member for Black Lives Matter. There's an actual photograph of the U.S. Capitol building that was blown up in the North Wing, and the intent was to kill Republicans. So we need to go back to 1983 and see this So hopefully somebody within the Trump administration or Trump lawyers will bring it to their attention that this has actually happened before, because Democrats want the American people to think that there's never been anything that's happened like this at the Capitol building, and that's just simply not true. I mean, when they had the Me Too rallies, they broke into the U.S. Capitol and were wandering around taking pictures, doing whatever they wanted, and it wasn't a big deal then. So it's time for people to kind of calm down about all this. President's out of office, President Trump's out of office. Let's sit down, let's start working on what the people of this country need, and let's get back to work for the American communities across the globe.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to give up their double standard,
No.
Kimberly, and that's example from 1983.
I was hoping.
Probably the best. Absolutely. Hey, listen, next week, can you do next week on a Wednesday?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Okie dokie. Kimberly Dvorak, and it's thekvreport.com. Check it out, because this whole report will be on there also. Yep. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Thanks, Chuck.